part 2 on the war on drugs. So as we left off from the first part, I was getting ready to speak on prohibition. Prohibition didn't work, nor did prohibition curb the desire to do alcohol. So if prohibition on alcohol didn't work, why do you believe prohibition on cocaine and street drugs will work? You know, in the early 19th century, you could go right to the pharmacy, get you some heroin, you know, and get any other drug that you wanted. But when we take something and make it illegal, what it does is create an underground economy. And the economist and the government knows this. When we look at the GDP, the underground economy is factored into it as well. You know, and even then, that's speculative at best. You know, so when we make something illegal that people clearly want and they're not going to stop doing it, you know, the government creates a black market for it on purpose. But when we create the black market, we create a means of moving money that's virtually undetected. And what we also do is we create an industry of crime. And when we create an industry of crime, it gives the government an excuse to take your money and spend it. You know, to make you feel as if you were in a constant threat of something, so that they scare you. Remember that logical fallacy. You know, and then all societies, when you look at the way society is set up, every society has to have a group of undesirables so the masses can feel self-righteous. I never understood why people always feel self-righteous. You know, for example, where I live at, there was a law recently passed. They made it illegal to smoke cigarettes in bars. So let's see if this makes sense. The majority of the people that voted people shouldn't smoke in bars are people that never go to bars. So why should they have a say-so in it? Why should their opinion matter? Why should I get an opportunity to vote on something that controls your life that doesn't affect me one way or another? You know, and when we think about the drug policies, you know, in Vietnam during the war, you know, we found out that the CIA controlled the heroin fields, you know, and since the start of the Iraqi war, you know, the U.S., they control the opium fields, the opium and poppy fields in Afghanistan. And since the start of the war, heroin internationally has become cheaper. It took them less than 2 years to control an opium field in a foreign country 9,000 miles away. In less than 2 years, they seized control of all the opium and poppy seeds in Afghanistan. But after 30 years of spending over $1 trillion, we can't regulate the flow of drugs within our own border after 30 years and hundreds of thousands of casualties, and after over 1 million arrests and hundreds of thousands on probation. We still can't find any intelligent leads on who's smart enough to smuggle the drugs past the Border Patrol, who's smart enough to smuggle it past the CIA. And the drugs seem to infest areas, you know, in areas up north in New York, seem to infest areas that it's impossible to grow the drugs. And the majority of the people selling the drugs have no means of getting an airplane or whatever means of flying to South America or over to Afghanistan and bring the drugs back. But when you look at the majority of people locked up for selling the drugs, they tend to be poor or some sort of minority. Doesn't that sound strange? It's just interesting. So the question we need to ask ourselves, who's benefiting from the drug war? The first obvious benefactor be the government. You know, it gives them an excuse to hire more staff, and it gives them an excuse to stay in your pocket. The legal industry is benefiting tremendously, because we hear many reports where they claim that the courts are being clogged. That means it's good for business, because I hate to go off on left field and talk about this, but courts are companies. They have tax identification number, and they operate off of penal sums and miscellaneous costs. In many municipalities, district courts, many of the judges' salary is paid for by that particular city and the state, and whereas if you deal with circuit level courts, the judge's salary is paid for by the county and by the state, and they make money off of selling securities by collecting pretrial interest. You have some attorneys that specialize in drug cases, so no matter what happens, they're going to make some money. And so the war on drug sadly it stimulates the economy. It's from that same broken notion that if I break out a window, I have to hire somebody. It stimulates the economy. If drugs are involved in your vehicle gets taken, they impound your vehicle or auction it off. And then judges benefit because anytime funds are paid or fines are paid into court cases, part of that fine goes to the judge association account to fund his pension. And so then you also deal with bonds are sold into the court, cases drag along, and you got pretrial interest accruing. Legal industry benefit from it. Who else is benefiting? The state benefit from it because for each prison that's locked up, they do a tax form called a 1099-C, and they get an obscene tax credit for it. More in the line with the private prisons. Last year, the prison industry made more of a profit than the New York Stock Exchange times 2. And then when we have people in jail, you got a free labor force. That's how they compete with third world countries, because the bulletproof vests that the military have were made in prisons. You got all type of industry that's made in prison. And then when you look at a lot of these private correctional facilities, you have judges and police chiefs that sit on the board of directors, and they push for more sentencing. Then you have some judges that may not necessarily agree with a certain law, but because you have maximum sentence requirements, the judge have to automatically give you the maximum sentence. It's definitely something to think about. And so when we think about drugs, I want you to take a long, hard look at yourself. There's other constructive things that can be spent with the tax dollars, at least I believe. What sparked this video was that, I keep seeing Lindsay Lohan in the media, because probation violation, obviously it's not working. She may not even be addicted to drugs, I don't know, but she likes to use. And so we shouldn't be penalizing individuals for human behavior. In other countries where cocaine and marijuana is legal, the addiction rate is much lower and the crime is lower. Most people in jail are recreational drug users. So I guess my biggest issue is if we're trying the same thing and if it's failing epically, perhaps we should try it. We should try another plan, because the war on drug is a cancer to the economy. It's got the police officers being exploited to be used to make money. Just imagine if we got such a problem on crime and a war on drugs. What if the government were to legalize cocaine and marijuana? Not only could they tax it, charge a sin tax the same way they do with spirits and alcohol, but it would cut out the middleman in the underground crime. It would cut out Pookie and Ray Ray from being able to sell on the corner. But then it would reduce crime too much. You know, 2 out of every 4 people that's employed in the country, they're either employed by the government or by an agency or a contractor of a contractor that has a contract with the government. So in a sick, draconian type of way, I understand why they like high crime, because when you got high crime for a prison industry, it guarantees a streamline of customers. And, you know, it creates a streamline of litigants in court for the attorneys and judges. And that's how the game is played. Have a good day.